This is Corinne.
And this is Ayani.
And you're listening to Sex, Love, Literature, a pop culture podcast where we take a semi-scholarly look at why
and how
the sex stuff in media matters.
This episode, we're joined by comic scholar and fellow monster aficionado, Dr. Sam Langsdale, to discuss demon lovers.
We parse through what makes a demon, as well as what we want from a demon lover, throw in some monster theory, and share some of our many, many favorites.
If you want to tell us about your favorite demon lover stories, find us on Instagram at SexLoveLit. We've also started sharing previews there for upcoming episodes, so you can do your SLL viewing homework if you want.
Or also just, like our posts. All right. Don't forget to subscribe on any of your favorite podcast platforms.
And leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Plus, if you add a comment, it really helps other folks find SLL.
As a note, this episode was recorded during the 2023 SAG-AFTRA strike. Without the labor of the actors currently on strike, along with their counterparts in other countries and industries, who also deserve fair wages and labor protections, none of the works we discuss here or in other episodes would exist.
All right, let's dive in. Hello, SLL listeners. Thank you so much for coming and listening to another episode of Sex, Love, Literature. We're so excited to have y'all here with us for a special Halloween episode. I know we don't often do holiday episodes. I know we've done some Christmas ones before.
Yeah, we did do one it was our 6th episode maybe on the that lesbian holiday rom-com. We didn't like it very much.
No, we didn't. The episode was great. The movie, not so much. So it's fun to kind of have a Halloween episode that we're doing, especially because Halloween is one of my favorite holidays. And it's kind of the start of my favorite run of the year, in part because you have Comic-Con, Halloween, Thanksgiving, my birthday, and Christmas all back to back. And it's very exciting for me. There's lots of presents, lots of money being spent. It's great. So for our Halloween episode, we are doing a special Trope Spotlight on demon lovers, which is very exciting for me. And I think for Corinne too. But part of the reason this is so exciting is that we have a very special guest with us today. I would like to introduce to you all Dr. Sam Langsdale. Hello, Sam.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me on. And
oh, geez. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Yeah, big shout out to Cody, who I think instigated this particular matching. I'm glad that we were able to meet their whims.
So Sam and I met many moons ago at the Monstrous Women in Comics conference, which in a lot of ways for me was the start of my journey into monster studies and comic studies in a more focused way. So in a lot of ways, Sam is at the start of my whole academic career in a lot of ways. So it's really exciting to have you here, to have you as part of this conversation. And what we often do is just throw the ball to our guest to introduce themselves. So Sam, who are you? Why are you on our Demon Lovers episode? So tell the listeners about yourself.
Right. So I'm an independent scholar, and Ayani, you're quite right that this all sort of started for me as well when I decided that there was something really exciting to think about around monstrosity and gender and specifically comics. So I organized that conference, which was at the University of North Texas in Denton. And very similarly, I had sort of just started getting into monster theory. That was one of my first big comic studies events in terms of, kind of doing something myself. So a common sort of point of burgeoning, I think,
okay.
For me as well. And that ended up then leading to an edited volume. So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of us that participated in that conference got together and made a book also called Monstrous Women in Comics, which
Which is great.
it is. I mean, I have to say, I realize I'm completely biased, but I think it is one of the coolest edited volumes in comic studies. It's fairly unique.
Mm.
And I think the quality of what we have in that book is pretty special. So that was a great project for me as the co-editor. Elizabeth Ray Cootie was the other editor on that volume.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And from there, I kind of went more in the direction of comics studies. So I have an article that also blends monster studies and comic studies, but I kind of went more seriously into the comic side of things. And I've been writing a lot about superheroes in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So my current project is a book that is going to be published by the University of Texas Press for
Ooh, exciting.
for their World Comics and Graphic Novels series,
Oh, very
and
cool.
it should be out in about a year.
Okay.
Yep. Um,
Gotta love academic
I know.
publishing.
Yeah. So the title of that is From the Margins into the Gutters, Searching for Feminist Superheroes. And I'm really excited. And I also have you to thank for your feedback on some of that book.
Oh, shucks. Well, I'm happy to do it, especially if it means I get to have you on the podcast. So, a little academic tit for tat, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. So, since it's pre-press, are you allowed to talk a bit about your book?
I haven't
Is that
been
something
told
that
not to. So I'm going to go ahead and say I can.
Yeah, go for it. Talk a little bit about your book. Tell us about it. What's at the core? What are the themes?
Yeah. So it's difficult sometimes to see this because superheroes have been a part of American culture basically since they hit the scene, right? And
Mhm.
I think that people tend to think that their view of superheroes is sort of unique, but there's been cycles
Mm.
of popularity and then waning and popularity and waning, and the conversation about will superheroes die out, when will we get over the superhero media, is not one that is unique to our current time. That has
Mm.
happened many times before, actually.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of hilarious when I see these articles that are yet again like, when will MCU go bust? The superhero is a tired
Mhm.
old thing, and I'm
Mhm.
like, that's funny because they were having that conversation after Tim Burton's Batman. They were having that conversation
Oh.
previous to that when, yet another TV series was focused on a superhero. So
Mm. Mhm.
none of
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
new, but it makes a lot of noise. And it started to really kind of grate me the wrong way because I totally appreciate that the sort of stereotypical or normative superhero tends to be white, male, nationalistic,
Mhm.
heteronormative,
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
able-bodied, cisgendered. And people then lean into this like, this is what the superhero thing is.
Mm.
But
Mhm.
that's
Mhm.
not what I was reading. The
Right.
comics
Mhm.
I was reading didn't look like that at all, you know?
Mhm.
So I thought, well, I think this is a silly thing. Like, the big part of this conversation is how exclusive these comics are and how, you know, intersecting marginalized identities just don't get seen.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
And the longer the conversation goes on like that, I think the more there is this tendency to continue to erase
Mm.
the
Mhm.
comics that do actually focus on marginalized
Oh, for
subjects.
sure, yeah.
So that's what I decided I was going to write about. I mean, I was reading these comics that didn't have necessarily very long runs. They were written mostly by women and people of color, and that, of
Mm.
course, has its own problems within the sort of mainstream superhero industry. These are
Yeah.
people that are very rarely hired and don't often get to
Mm.
keep their
Mhm.
jobs for very
Mhm.
long.
Mhm.
So my
Mm.
point is not to ignore any of that, but just to kind of shift the emphasis of the conversation and come back to a point where we can recognize that there are very serious and long kind of seated problems in mainstream superheroes, but that's not inevitable.
Right.
And that there have been really different books produced.
For sure.
Maybe they don't get as much attention, but they're there. And so if we
Mm.
want more of that, surely we need to actually talk about them. So this is what the basis of the book is. It's 4 chapters. Each one is focused on a superhero comic that is complete in its entirety. So I'm not
Okay.
talking about anything that has an ongoing run.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all of the comics focus on female characters. Most of them are meant to be sort of solo titles, but lots and
Okay.
lots of the books actually kind of couch the star player in a team. So it's a little disingenuous to say that it's only about solo female-led comics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I think that I don't know, I think it's okay. I am pretty happy with where it ended up.
We can say more than okay, I'm sure. We big up ourselves on the podcast. I'm sure it's fantastic. It's great.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, I'm proud of it. Like, I hope it makes a
Good.
positive contribution. That's sort of what I'm aiming for.
Well, I for one am excited to get my hands on it.
Thank you.
Because it's the University, what is it? The University Press of Texas or University Texas
It is
Press?
the University of Texas Press. I think
University
Mississippi
Texas
is the
Press.
only one that does the UPM thing.
But because Mississippi is the one that I buy so
Yeah,
much
I
from,
know.
like it gets stuck in my brain. But no, I can't wait to get the book. And the Texas Press books are often not super duper expensive
That's right.
for an independent scholar to purchase. So looking forward to seeing that coming out. And I want an autographed copy, of course,
I
if I
I
if I can
mean,
so request.
I guess if you insist.
I do. I'm insisting live for other people to hear. Well, I guess not live, pre-recorded for other people to hear. I am insisting. Oh, excellent. So, thank you so much for telling us about your book. Folks, look out for it in about a year because academic publishing is what it is. So, we'll throw some links about Sam and about where you can find her work in the show notes. Obviously, you should check those because Sam is great. But before we dive into talking about demon lovers specifically, it's time for Corinne and I's favorite segment of the show, What's Sparkin' Joy? So, Corinne, what is What's Sparkin' Joy?
So, What's Sparking Joy is a segment where we talk about something that we're reading, watching, or listening to that is currently sparking joy for us. So, Ayani, do you want to go first and model for our guest how we do this?
Oh, that's right, because if you were to go first, you'd be like, I talked for 25 minutes about a C drama. I understand. So,
Wow, okay.
So for me, what's sparking joy right now is Fiona and Cake, which is an Adventure Time mini series that focuses on 2 characters who in the Adventure Time universe were like fan fiction characters of Finn and Jake, who are the main characters of Adventure Time. But this series focuses on them as main characters and focuses on the Adventure Time multiverse, which was not a thing I thought I would say, but I also never finished Adventure Time, so maybe Adventure Time like watchers are like, Ayani, they did this in season 5. Sorry guys, I didn't finish it. I'll go back and watch it. But Fiona and Cake,
you won't.
I mean, maybe I will. Who knows? It's been on the list a long time, if I'm being honest. But Fiona Cake focuses on the Adventure Time multiverse. Fiona and Cake are traveling across this multiverse with Simon Petrikov, who used to be the Ice King. I'm not going to go into all the intricacies of the show because there's a lot. And if you're not an Adventure Time watcher, a lot of it's not going to make sense. But what I really appreciated, it's only 10 episodes. Each episode is about, 24, 26 minutes, is that it's a really interesting kind of, I don't know, conversation about adulthood and relationships and what it means to like grow up and your life isn't going how you expected it to go. And maybe you always wanted your life to actually be this magical adventure, but instead you had to like get a job. And I'm not talking about me, obviously not, but it kind of has that conversation while still allowing the main character to go on a bit of a magical, perilous adventure, which I think is really interesting. And there's a lot of, I mean, maybe Corinne, if I could get you to watch it, there's a lot of different interesting relationships that take place over the course of the show, and thinking about different ways that in different universes relationships can go in completely different ways. So I really liked Fiona and Cake. It's on Max, which used to be HBO Max. Everything is changing its name and is confusing, but it's on Max. It's really good. It's a short watch. I think it just finished by the time this episode goes live, maybe about a month ago, but really worth it. I kind of powered through it, and it brought me a lot of joy. So that's what sparking joy for me. Fiona and Cake. Oh, also key point, Cake is a cat.
Oh, that is a key point.
So Fiona is going on adventures with her cat, and literally that's all I've ever wanted in life. So, there's that. But that's what's sparking joy for me. Corinne, what's sparking joy for you?
All right, so despite Aoni's dig earlier, what's sparking joy for me is actually not a piece of East Asian media.
Oh, snap.
So I just finished season 2 of Wheel of Time, which is on Amazon Prime. It is based on the very long, very epic series by Robert Jordan. The last few books, which were completed by Brandon Sanderson, I read those in high school, and then the last few, as they came out, and I have not revisited the book series for many, many years. But I watched the first season when it came out, or as it aired, and was like, oh, well, this is good. This is they're doing some reparative work here with the way they do gender and race, and there are some issues potentially with colorism that other people have spoken about more eloquently than I can. But then season 2 just finished airing, and it is fantastic.
Oh, okay.
I liked the book series. I didn't love it. There were again, some issues with it, particularly in the way female characters were treated. But season 2 was so good. I really appreciated the character growth. I really appreciated how they wove together the different arcs. And it was just really good. I really enjoyed it. And also, this may come up again later in this episode. And this is maybe a slight spoiler for the series, but I'm gonna do it anyway. They also introduced and so the first Forsaken. So the setup for Wheel of Time is that the Dark One is, I don't know, in danger of affecting the world, breaking the pattern, breaking the Wheel of Time, whatever. Things keep repeating themselves. There are reincarnations. The dragon, who is some dude, keeps being reborn and has to defeat the Dark One. The important point here is that the Dark One has followers called the Forsaken. They prefer to refer to themselves as the Chosen, and they are very hot.
Ooh, that's what I was hoping was about to happen. Keep going. Tell me more.
So, when I read the books, the Forsaken, were just scary. They didn't do it for me. But watching the show, 2 of the Forsaken are out so far, at least at the beginning of the season 2. One of them, his name is Ishamel.
Oh, that's a good scary name.
I will now exclusively refer to him as Ishi, which Lanfear, the second Forsaken, calls him as a pet name.
Ishi. Oh, yes. Okay. Continue.
But Lanfear is who I'm really here to talk about. So she's the daughter of the night, very scary, very dark, whatever, but also, again, very hot. And the thing about this that is very funny is that for years, Lanfear had a relationship with the dragon in his previous life, and now she's back after being locked in some sort of mythical magic prison for 3,000 years. I am not talking about this in canonical ways.
It's
but
fine.
She comes back and tries to seduce the dragon reborn, and she kind of succeeds at it. So book readers were like, Rand, why are you so dumb? Why do you keep falling for this? And then they released stills of the actress who plays Lanfear from the show, and all of essentially the lesbians on Tumblr were like, oh.
So
we see now.
So we'll be including pictures of her in the show notes is what I'm hearing.
That does seem necessary, yes.
All right, that's a good plan. Good plan.
So yeah, what's sparking joy for me? Season 2 of Wheel of Time, available on Amazon Prime.
That was fantastic. Like, I was gonna dig more at you and at both of us for not talking about East Asian media, but like, perfect. 10 out of 10, no notes. So Sam, what is sparking joy for you?
So I have two things, but one I'll talk more about, and the other I'm just going to mention briefly. Both of which I came to the party really late on. So one is the series Glow Up on Netflix, which is a sort of competition for aspiring British makeup artists, and they go on and have to do a whole bunch of different industry challenges. So it's not just glamour beauty, it's not just runway beauty, it's also special effects and sort of editorial shoots. So they have to demonstrate a lot of skills. And like other British competition shows, it's pretty friendly, right? Like everyone is operating in good faith. It's not this sort of American bullshit where you're like trying to take someone's knees out, you know? So I really enjoy that. But for me, this has been really fun because I always have something like that on the background when I'm crocheting, which I do a lot in my free time. So I've really had a good time watching Glow Up. Not that it has changed my attitude towards makeup at all. Like I still basically see that as only necessary when I have to like impress particular people, but it's fun to see other people do it.
Mood.
The other thing that I'm just like super behind on, but I finally watched Wednesday, which is also on Netflix.
Oh.
And I really enjoyed it. The first time I binged it really quite quickly, and I had a good time, but at the end I kind of felt like it was a little derivative. It sort of felt like Sabrina and Harry Potter sort of mashed together with a few other things. But then I started showing it to my partner, and I thought he would just kind of think it was okay, but he got so into it that he downloaded all of the remaining episodes so that he could watch them on the plane when he was leaving the next day. Like he was not going to be able to wait to come home to finish the series. He had to like take it with him. So it really sparked joy for me that he got so into this kind of thing, because I typically am the one who like peddles Halloween propaganda in this house. But he ate it up. And I think a large part of that is Jenna Ortega. Like he, I think, developed a little dark heart crush, which is quite sweet actually. So yeah, I have to say I liked it a lot better the second time around.
Interesting.
Mostly because I knew all the plot points so that I could focus on performances or costumes. And I just think that like Gwendolyn Christie is sort of the coolest, baddest, biggest bitch ever. I don't know how you have like to be, but I assume you have to have so much confidence to move through the world as a woman of that stature. And I just really admire her, and in her like presence, she literally fills the frame that she's in almost every single time. And I was really impressed with Jenna Ortega. Like, again, it's a little surprising to see with a character like Wednesday, who's supposed to be sort of so deadpan and sarcastic, but she actually delivers like a very dynamic performance. Like, there are a couple scenes where she's playing a sort of early North American pilgrim, and she has this sort of like pseudo Dutch Northeastern colony accent, which to me is just wild to hear her do. And then she switches back to, you know, her Wednesday voice at various points. So I just thought actually there's a lot here. I mean, I'm not gonna like completely reverse my opinion that it's a little derivative. I think the storytelling fits very much in a particular like type of media, but man, it was fun. And I think made all the more fun because my partner just fell fast and hard. Like, he would let Wednesday pierce him with red hot pokers without question.
Oh, that's funny. So I actually haven't watched Wednesday because I was hearing kind of mixed things about it, but hearing you talk about it makes me want to check it out, maybe.
Yeah.
And also, as a random aside, Andrew, my spouse, actually mentioned, he was like, "Hey, have you been searching like Jenna Ortega?" And I'm like, "No, why?" And he's like, "My For You page is like all Jenna Ortega, and I have no idea why." And I'm like, "Don't look at me. I don't know." So she's infiltrated our house and our internet, I guess.
Well, this
I
is
don't
gonna
know.
make it worse. Sorry or you're welcome. I don't know which.
So that was What's Sparking Joy. So, kind of using Wednesday as a jumping off point for thinking about our topic. I know Wednesday herself is not a demon, right? But I think we can use it as a transition to thinking about these dark figures that we tend to enjoy watching romantic relationships of, perhaps develop little crushes of our own, and kind of transition into thinking about demon lovers writ large. We wanted to talk about demon lovers for a kind of silly reason. In part, yes, because I study monsters. Part of my dissertation did think about like a romance game that was all about demons, which I'm sure we'll come back to a little later in the conversation. But in particular, there were some things that we were watching that we were like, maybe we should talk about these feelings that we're having for these people who are demons. Corinne, do you want to pick this up? Because
Yeah,
it's your
so
fault.
as previously established, I watch a lot of Chinese dramas, and one of the genres of Chinese dramas that I frequently watch are xianxia, which I'm sure I am butchering the pronunciation of, but they frequently have demon characters, and demon in that context means something a little bit different than demon in like a Christian Western context.
Hmm.
It more
Hmm.
means just like non-human characters, and I'm very much oversimplifying that.
Mm.
But there was a C drama I was watching called Love You Seven Times, which was fine. The C drama was fine. It was very cute. But the male lead at one point turns into a cat demon. And we'll link to some images of him in the show notes, but these
Yeah, we will.
gift sets of him started going around Tumblr like after I had kind of dropped the show, and it was so confusing how attractive it was because he was clearly a child, kind of like a cat, but
No,
like
it was hot though. I was like, oh no, this cat man.
and there's like this kind of like makeout scene, and he like is doing sort of cat-like things, but also it's very hot.
It was hot.
So of course I sent Ayani like those gifts and was like, Ayani, it is a cat demon. What is happening? So that is how the idea for this episode was born.
Yeah, because I legit I asked her and I was like, so should I watch this show for the cat demon? And she was like, I don't know if you need to get all the way through it just to see the cat demon. I'll just keep sending you gifts, which she did because she's a very good friend. So yeah, Hot Cat Demon was kind of the impetus of the show, which is a really silly thing to say, but it got us thinking about these characters and wondering, one, why they work as kind of romantic characters, but also why they work for the audience, because there are so many demons, I think, in media that are not even necessarily romantic leads, but the fandom is like, that's my spouse now. I love you. And I will do whatever evil you want me to do, demon. That is what it is. With those gift sets. And then there's also another show that I'm currently working my way through called Lost You Forever, which is a very uplifting title. I love telling it to people. They're like, "What are you watching?" I'm like, "Are you ready? It's Lost You Forever." And there are a couple demons, let's say, in Lost You Forever. But the main one is Zhanglu, who is a 9-headed snake demon who, of course, takes the appearance of a hot man with silver hair, which we can also come back to for demons, because I don't know what it is, but once you put silver hair on a demon, it's like, that's it. And I think we're going to do an episode about Lost You Forever, so I won't go into too much detail here, and we will include pictures of him in the show notes as well. But I'm really interested in how he kind of functions as a potential love interest, how he's different from the other love interests in the show,
Yeah, especially
right?
since he's like A, very hot, but B, more
Yes,
they're all very hot, but he's more like antagonistic, I think, in part because of his more like demon-esque attributes.
right. And there is a fox character who I think is played more as a human rather than a demon interest lover. But he's very sweet and has foxtails, and I adore him. So I think we can include him in the
Yeah,
conversation.
there
But
are many fox demons, both in K-dramas and C-dramas that I think well, and also probably Japanese
hmm
stuff as well that are
hmm
also probably relevant
yeah,
to the topic.
yeah. So hot demons got us to this point, but also, of course, because I study monsters, I think about demons all the time. And because Halloween's coming up, and we thought it'd be fun. So, thinking about a demon lover, and this is interesting kind of based on what you said, Corinne, that like in a lot of the shows you're watching, demon, I'm putting quotes around that, is not something specific. It's not like a creature from hell, right?
Yeah,
So,
so, like, when I was talking to some of my friends who are less familiar with, like, the tropes and conceits of C-dramas, was like, "Yeah, like, this fox demon, like, I'm all about it." He was like, "Oh, well," like, he, like, immediately assumed that I meant that the fox demons were, like, affiliated with, like, the devil. I was like, "Oh,
mhm.
no, this is not that." They, like, are perhaps demonic, but they're not evil evil.
And so that kind of leads us to wanting, for the purposes of our conversation, to define a demon lover. So, when we say demon lover, what do we even mean? Because, like, do all cat boys fall under the category of demon lover? I don't know about that. Sometimes they're just cat boys, right? Sometimes you're playing with, like, oh God, what's the word I want? Like demi-human tropes. And I don't know if I would include demi-humans under the umbrella of a demon lover. But we've been talking a lot about Chinese dramas and K-dramas and anime. So I'm going to throw the question to Sam first. Sam, when you think demon lover, like what rises to the surface to you? How would you define it?
Well, I think the first example that came to my mind actually probably fits really well with the ones that you've talked about in a kind of hilarious opposite end of the animal spectrum way. Um,
I'm ready.
I went to Howl's Moving Castle and thought about
Oh,
Howl.
yeah.
No, I mean, technically he's like a wizard or whatever, but that all gets like really muddy at the end when you figure out that like Calcifer, who is a fire demon, is actually the one who's like holding Howl's heart. And so therefore Howl and Calcifer are sort of the eh. But what I was thinking about is like towards the end of it's an animated film. Towards the end of the film, the female protagonist, Sophie, is sort of having a vision slash dream where she's chasing Howl because he's clearly like under duress. He's in
Mm,
trouble. There's something sort of weighing on him, haunting him even. And she finally tracks him down. And he's in this sort of half well, more than half monster. He's sort of in this monstrous form, and it's like a kind of like a crow thing, but he's like
mhm.
Mhm.
really nice and fluffy. And I mean, this is the thing that really strikes me is the first vision we see of Sophie like openly expressing her love and desire towards Hal is when he's in this monstrous form.
Hmm.
And then later she finds him again sort of transformed this way and runs to him, and she sort of like buries herself in all these like luxurious yet at the same time sort of oily slimy feathers. And I've seen a lot of fan art that leans into that. Like
Mm.
people like monstrous howl.
Mhm.
It's,
Yeah, they
you
do.
know, I think there's something to that. So I'm obviously like going for this definition a little liberally because
Okay.
we know Howl is supposed to be a wizard, but his connection to a fire demon and then his sort of dabbling in monstrosity in order to achieve certain ends, I think makes him demonic.
Ooh.
So, a couple things that come forward for me. There's this element of willingness and or desire to engage with chaos, even bad, maybe evil,
Mm.
Mhm.
without a whole hell of a lot of remorse, right? There's not a lot of moralizing when you're dealing with demons. I
Hmm.
don't think, again, that it's necessarily like a kind of Christian value set where you're talking about devil and evil and whatever. But I think you are definitely talking about figures that are very open to chaos and
Hmm.
being a little bad, you know?
Mhm.
Um, Generally, I think that they also seem to have their kind of own worldview. Like they don't necessarily care if it strikes people as good or otherwise. There's also, I think, this kind of consistent element of hybridity
Mm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
and masking.
Ooh,
And I
that's a
don't
good
always
one.
think that that's vicious or like deceitful. I think again, it kind
Mhm.
of fits into this agenda of like, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get to what I need to get to. So whether it's putting on a human skin suit or hiding your tails or, whatever,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
milting your feathers back off. I think there's always this sort of combo there where I agree with you that it's not just demi-human, but there is always this hybrid element, and demons seem to have the capacity and the proclivity to sort of mask
Mm.
their demonness if and when it suits them. And that's all the things that I can think about when I think of all my various examples that kind of generally applies, but it's certainly something that came up for me when I was thinking about Hal and Calcifer.
Yeah, so there's that was great.
Yeah, that
But
was
B,
fantastic.
there's a couple things I kind of wanna pull on there. So are you familiar with the book version of Hell's Moving Castle at all, Sam?
No, I've never had a chance to read it.
Oh, it's good.
Something that is kind of interesting to me, because I think you're absolutely right that Wizard Howl in the film version is that sort of demonic figure, is that in the book, Howl doesn't do, like, the bird
Mhm.
transformation thing at all, and he very much is like
Mm.
there is one sequence, I think it's been a little bit since I've read it, but and there is one sequence where I think he, like, does transform into other forms, but he is very much like Wizard Howl the
Mm.
whole time, so even
Hmm.
though he has the, like, negotiable moral compass sometimes, I don't know that I would call Howl demonic in the same way in the book as I would in the film, so I wonder if
That's interesting.
that makes me think that that element of non-humanness, which could take a lot of different forms, is important to interpreting Howl that way.
Which I think is important to back to the beginning of the conversation, maybe comes from the fact that the film is Studio Ghibli.
Mhm.
Mm.
Right? So
Mhm.
we're talking now about creators who are drawing on East Asian cultural traditions in their interpretation
Mhm.
of the novel, which was English. Is that right?
Yeah, Diana Wynne Jones is a British fantasy
Yeah.
author.
So maybe that's where that element comes into play. I'm not sure, but it's an interesting distinction for sure.
Well, and also maybe building on that even further, while I deeply love Calcifer, he's very great. I don't know that he is necessarily like a demon lover figure, because he is like, as a fire demon, he doesn't necessarily have the same, I don't know, romantic. He doesn't have the human element that would like work for the romantic
Yeah.
appeal kind of piece of it. The lover part of the demon lover phrase.
Yeah, I think for me, the hybridity feels super important, but also the masking. Like Calcifer, he's just a
Mhm.
fire demon. It's not that there aren't books out there where people are like getting it on with like, I don't know, Ifrit
Pillows.
or something, right? Or pillows. That was a whole situation. I'm not gonna tangent and talk about that. You can well, I'll post it on our stories again or something. But anyhow, I think that going back and forth and the masking is something that's kind of I don't know, central to thinking about demon lovers. And I'm sure there are examples that fall outside of that, but as soon as you said that, Sam, my brain started like firing with other things and I'm like, "Oh, okay, then maybe this could be, maybe this could be." So like for example, and then there are some other questions like as we're building our definition that I'd like to throw at y'all. But there's anime and manga series that I absolutely love called Fruits Basket, in which the central tenet is there's a family and that they're cursed. And every time they are hugged by someone, and I'm putting quotes around this, but of the opposite sex, it's an older story, they turn into an animal of the Chinese zodiac. But the main character who, or excuse me, the character who ends up being the main love interest, who's a cat boy, and I adore him, he has an additional form because the cat, because of supernatural stuff that happened in the past, has a grotesque form that, yes, on one hand, he turns into a cute little orange kitty cat, but if you take his bracelet off, he turns into this weird, smelly creature with warped knees that go in the wrong direction. And part of the story is both him coming to accept that as part of himself, but also the female lead showing that creature love and affection when the male lead was always demonized for having that part of him. So the fact that he has these three forms, one of which is the curse that everyone has, but then one is that takes it the step further, almost in a way sets him up kind of like a demon lover. Though, spoiler for a very old story, at the end everyone's curse is lifted, right? So he doesn't have to be this weird stinky creature anymore. He can just be him. So I don't know if it neatly falls in the box because it goes away, but it also made me think about, and I haven't watched the second season yet, but Good
Yeah.
Omens, right?
Yeah.
Which more literally has demon love interest, who he also has different forms,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Oh God, I'm forgetting his name because it's been a second. Though I love the book and I really enjoyed the first season as well. Played by David Tennant. Was his real person name and not the character name.
Crowley.
Oh, thank you, Crowley, yes. But he does masking,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because he has his, like, I'm a human walking around the streets of London face, but then he has his demon face with the demon elements and things like that. And there's definitely a love story there as well.
Yeah,
So
that was actually the second major example that came to my mind, and I think the second season lays all this on even thicker. Um,
mhm,
and
mhm.
what you just said as well is really interesting to me, thinking about how, again, like, Sophie cuddles this big drippy crow. So you think, okay, well, then obviously, yes, it's this human woman showing this creature some love, but by the end of the animated film, he appears to just be back to his sort of supermodel self. But I think that's interesting to think about with Good Omens. I'm gonna just say this obliquely because the second season has just come out relatively
Yeah.
recently.
Mhm,
It's on
mhm.
Amazon Prime. Exactly this conflict comes up about
Interesting.
whether you can have a demon lover as a demon,
Mm.
or are you only ever in it because there's some kind of hope for a cure, right? Like,
Ooh.
how many of our demon
Ah.
lover
Spicy.
examples actually angle towards wanting to change them or improve them or cure them, whatever it is?
Ooh.
And does that fit into our definition if we're talking about how this stuff occurs in media? And I think Good Omens 2, like, really, it's heartbreaking. It is, I cannot even, I don't have the words. I'll
Oh, no.
send you the link. There was a recent article that put out on Tor.com, and it was somebody kind of personally reflecting on their feelings as a queer person watching the second
Mhm.
season and what is a queer love story between Crowley and Aziraphale, and all the dynamics about what it means for an angel to have a demon lover. The article is just as gut wrenching as the show. So in both cases, I would just warn everyone, like, make sure you're at home and you can have a cup of tea and a blankie. But I think that it is a really fascinating point that you've made, because Good Omens takes that on 100%. This question of, like, what is it that we actually
Mhm.
want and expect out of demon lovers? And is it ultimately that we think we have to cure them?
That's interesting. So I almost wonder if there are like two vein of demon lover stories. One
Hmm.
that kind of has this idea, and I'm going to put quotes around cure, right? Because if we're talking about a creature's nature, right? Are you really curing it or making it into, you know, something that you can tame? Oh, tame. So I think we have the question of like taming the demon versus like, this is going to sound dirty, but I'm going to say it, versus just riding with the demon, right? Um, because so what jumps to mind for me too is maybe this is a split also in the kinds of stories that you're telling, but and something I do want to ask our listeners. I don't know a lot of like prose based demon love stories. So if you have your favorite like demon love romance text that you'd like to send us, send it to me because I will probably read it and enjoy the heck out of it. But I think there's almost a question of like what does the viewer, the reader, the listener come to the story for? Are they
Hmm.
coming for kind of the like redemption or the demon, or are they coming because they want to be ravaged by the demon, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of an interesting question because okay, so here's another example. And then I kind of want to ask another question since we're monster scholars thinking about monsters and demons and all that kind of stuff. But like there's a really classic anime called Inuyasha, and the main love interest is a half demon. And I don't think Inuyasha is ever not a demon, right? But he's a half demon, so there's all this stuff about his parentage and how people treat him and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think his demonness is ever treated as something that needs to go away, but also he's not a full demon, right? So it's kind of almost like he gets the edge of being the demon, the bad boy kind of a thing, but also he's not all the way bad, and he's fallen in love with human women before. However, the fandom is pretty feral for his full demon brother Shishomaru, present company included. Like that was a period of my life. Long white hair. He's mean. He doesn't like Inuyasha. And I was like, yes, take me, please. But he and this, well, I had a lot of feelings in just that realm of sounds just there, but, like, he adopts a child, so to speak, and then we get to see a bit of his humanity through his relationship with this small human. But then they had to go and make that weird in the new Inuyasha series, and, like, they get married and have a child, and I'm like, "That's disgusting.
Ugh.
I want no parts of that." So I just pretend it doesn't exist, that it didn't happen. Um, there is this kind of like, you don't want him to not be a demon, but you want him to treat you human enough
Mhm.
in a sense. But
Well,
Corinne, you
there's
gasped.
kind of a distinction here between being demon, I guess, is something you are versus something you do. Because
Hmm.
there's been kind of a string of Zeonzias lately where the focus is that demons are treated with like extreme prejudice by like the different immortal sects. So like the one I'm thinking of specifically that I also thought of earlier when Sam brought up like the way that demons are required to mask is one from I think 2019 or 2020 called Love and Redemption.
Mm.
And the male lead in that one, his name is Safong, which the female lead says so many times that I remember his name, even though I mostly don't remember names. But he is a demon, but he has to wear a mask as part of, like, the sect that he's from, and they're all required to wear a mask so that they don't reveal that they are demons, because if they
Hmm.
do, then they will be killed, but then it goes, like it's a really long C-drama, and I enjoyed it, and I do recommend it, but it's, like, 60-something episodes, but,
Oof.
like, the point that is kind of being made with these various sort of, like, monster of the week kind of situations is that, like, the problem isn't that demons are demons as like at and aren't human. It's that the demons that like kill people and like treat them badly and like, enslave people, like that's a problem, but just being a demon isn't.
Interesting. And it's funny because I feel like some of the lore, though, with some demon lover stories is that the demon is the demon that like eats people, but they don't
Mhm.
want to eat you. Maybe they did at first, but now they want to love you and, give you demon snuggles. I don't know. Um, Very tame way to put that, I suppose. And that's kind of one of the things I'm perhaps trying to wrap my brain around in a sense is the difference between like I'm a demon because that's how I was born, but like I don't be eating people versus the oh no, I ate somebody last week, but I like you and I'm not going to eat you
Mm-hmm.
because I like you. But there's still that sense of danger because they still eat people. I'm using that as an example, right? So I guess this kind of leads me into another question. How I think the eating people thing is actually a good segue, but like what is the difference between like a demon lover and a monster lover? Is there a distinction we
Mm-hmm.
want to draw there?
I mean, I think in certain ways you could, and in other ways, I think that's not going to be a line you can defend. So,
Mm.
so this idea, it connects to the conversation that you've been setting up. This idea of like, are they demonic because people fear them or ostracize them or you know say they're demons, or is it because they're like eating babies? I mean, like whatever.
Mhm.
um Right, and this is one of the things that we learn from monster theory is that, like, monsters are made, right? This is
Mm,
it's a
mhm.
cultural category that is carved out, at particular times for political, social, cultural, political reasons.
Right.
When you kind of take a step back and look at anything that constitutes a monster, again, it's really hard to distinguish it from kind of any of the other wild, weird, and fantastic creatures that exist, either
Mm.
within made up universes or in our own world. And I think it's even easier to see when you look at our world and who gets called a monster. It's always pretty
Mhm.
transparent that this is just
Mm-hmm.
someone who is being, marginalized, ostracized for a variety of reasons that serve the sort of dominant and often oppressive social structure, right? So
Mm.
the people who get called monstrous oftentimes are being called that because of their difference.
Mhm. Mhm.
That works even in fantasy, right? So, like, again, this
Mm-hmm.
idea of why do we think it's like extra horrifying that this kind of chaotic masked demon, again, I thought about when you were talking, I thought about The Good Place. Michael, who is
Oh
the chief
Ah.
architect, is a
yeah.
demon, and there's a whole series of conversations where he tries to describe to his residents why he can't take his skin suit off because it's all this
Mhm.
horrible, pussy, like multi-headed, oozy, whatever.
Mhm.
But he's not gonna kill them, so therefore it's okay, right? But I mean, it starts to get to a point where you're like, well, we love a good like slaying if we think it's for the right reasons,
Hmm.
right? We want a shield maiden who's not afraid to like plunge her sword into something. But on the other hand, like we don't want just your kind of random agent of chaos doing that. So
Mm-hmm.
there's this like, how do we start to distinguish beyond the idea that the outcasts become the monsters, become the demons?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I think all of this is to say that that is where I feel like you'd have a really hard time maintaining an ability to distinguish between demon and monster. This sort of
Yeah.
overlap of like what actually makes them that thing.
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Beyond, I mean, but then could you like collect a list of characteristics that typically belong more to demon, like representations of demons, than they do to other types of monsters? Like I think you could. It's just that base level of like, on this, like, how are we defining these things? How do we even understand them? How do we perceive them when they appear? I'm not sure you'd be able to
Mm.
unpick that similarity between demons and any other kind of monster.
Yeah, it's really interesting not to like go back on some of the really good stuff we said at first, but part of me almost feels like it comes down to whatever universe your story is inhabiting
Sure.
because you're right, so much of this is like an overlap of who or what transgresses, right?
Mhm.
Who or what
Mm-hmm.
we're pushing away on the other side of what is right or moral or what is supposed to be. It almost is like, okay, if I'm in a fantasy universe and they call them vampires, then that's what they are. But if I'm in the fantasy universe and the bloodsuckers that fly around and turn into bats are demons,
Mhm.
I might be like, wait a minute, that sounds like a vampire. But the universe is like, no, 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 these are demons.
Mhm.
Our bat monsters are demons. Yeah, and it, in a way, it can almost come down to story. Because also one of my questions was like, would we consider vampire lovers demon lovers? And it's like, maybe, I guess, perhaps, But if like for example, the new season of Castlevania just dropped, and I don't know if either of you, I know Corinne hasn't, but I don't know if you've watched Castlevania season 1, Sam. But part of it is about the love story between Dracula and his human wife.
Mhm.
And would Dracula be considered a demon lover here, or would we just be like, well, he's a vampire, so we put him in another bucket? Which is a big question. And also their son Alucard is another one who is on my like, hello, hot vampire man list. So, but that, I mean, it's kind of a big question that like in a way we've answered in the sense that like you can't really pull them apart. I suppose you can, but like, is drawing the lines really going to be beneficial?
I was just gonna quickly say, if we go back to like the criteria that we've kind of put in our basket so far, the idea of hybridity and masking, then
Mhm.
vampires are totally demons, right?
Mm-hmm.
True. I mean, to be fair, Alucard doesn't transform, but he is half human, half vampire, so that's hybrid. But Krim, what were you gonna say?
So, kind of not exactly shifting the focus here, but we've talked a lot about how we would define demons in like the demon lover equation, but what about what we're positioning for like a demon lover? Because I'm thinking here, so taking off for a second my scholar hat, because I totally agree with you that like demons, monsters, devils play a similar like role in like the other and how people exist in relation to power structures, like those are all similar, but like as just like a casual consumer, if I'm looking for like a genre thing and I
Mm,
am told I'm getting a demon lover story, I think my expectations are different than if I'm told I'm getting like a story where the monster is the lover. That was not
mm.
a question, that was a statement, but what do you
Well, okay.
think?
No, wait. Hold on. Before you pass it away, like, what do you mean by like distinction? Like, if if you are putting yourself in the purchaser role, right? Like, what distinction are you expecting? Because for me, I don't know. The only thing I would expect differently perhaps is what my demon looks like. Like I might expect some more horns and some more hooves happening, but like the context of the story, I don't necessarily know if I'd want something different.
I think it's again that kind of like world building genre expectation of like
Okay.
what the like other form the figure has. Like cuz I'm thinking
Mm.
maybe kind of a silly example, but like I would not necessarily consider Beauty and the Beast like a story with a demon lover, but like I would think of the beast more in like the monster category. And
Hmm.
maybe that's like a false distinction that I'm drawing, but like I would consider the beast separate from more like like more different than like Mazikeen in Lucifer.
Mm. Though Mazikeen is associated with the like religious,
Yeah.
the you know, kind of demon. Hmm. I wonder if you're coming to a demon lover story, at least maybe from a Western context, there is that expectation of Christian religious divide, right? So
Mhm.
incubus, succubus, Lucifer, Beelzebub vibe of demon versus like, as I call him, the sexy snake man.
Mhm. Well, and like circling back to my what's sparking joy thing, like Lanfear and Ishamael, I would consider in the category of like demons in part because they're associated with like the dark one, but they still really only have human forms. So they do monstrous things. Like they do a lot of like very bad things to a lot of people, but I would not necessarily consider them actual monsters.
No. And if I was buying a demon lover text, I'd want to see the demon side. I wouldn't want to just see the humanoid side. But maybe that's just me.
You know, and I'm not sure how, like, this is probably just getting more convoluted, but my superhero brain has sort of kicked in here, and I'm thinking about my friend and colleague Anna Peppard, who does
Mm-hmm.
really
Mm-hmm.
great, sexy scholarship, and I mean, pretty much everything she writes now is about like rivulets on some kind of weird body that you're like, I did not think that was sexy, but now that you've said that,
I can't think of it any other way.
right? But her love, her true love is Nightcrawler
Mm-hmm.
from the X-Men. And here again, I think you have this really interesting kind of what are we expecting? I would definitely say he fits into a demon lover category
Yeah.
because,
Yeah.
he technically, I think they call him a demon at various points, and, he carries around all of this boring Catholic guilt about it. But, he also has fairly fantastic abilities to sort of transform. He has a very hybrid appearance. He's
Mm-hmm.
apparently got velvety fur, and he sort of has a devil tail,
Yeah.
unlike the split ostrich feet. It's like, I'm not sure what you'd classify him as otherwise, but he is very like flirty and suave and romantic and has pointy teeth and like yellow eyes. So he kind of brings that like demonic thing into what becomes very sexy at points. One of the images that Anna shares a lot, which is just hilarious, is Nightcrawler like reclining on his side, like with his head propped up. And it looks a lot like the images of Burt Reynolds from the 70s where he's naked in front of a fire. And it's just, I'm sorry, like this is probably ancient history for a lot of listeners, but you could Google it.
Oh no, this is show notes material. Like, as soon as you started talking about Nightcrawler, I was like, show notes.
Yeah.
They need to see this. It's important.
But I think what keeps coming back to me, so it works with Nightcrawler too, and I think, Curran, you bringing up the Beast is like a really helpful example because it does start to, I can't articulate it maybe very well, but it does start to
Mhm.
solidify in my mind there's a difference between the Beast and
Yeah.
Nightcrawler. And again, like, is it this element of kind of chaos and unpredictability that Nightcrawler has? Is it a moral dynamism? Like, Nightcrawler makes a lot of
Mhm.
decisions that you could take a step back from and be like, actually, that's vigilantism. Like, that's not great if you twist it a certain way. Whereas the Beast is just, that is an example of a creature that is laden with moral bad, therefore they suffer, right? Like, there's
Mm.
not a lot of like complex decision making going on for that type of monster. He's just monstrous. I don't
Well, and
know.
it's also for him framed as something in need of a cure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which Nightcrawler, throughout his long history, there is a lot of back and forth as to whether or not he thinks he wants to be cured, be different. And ultimately, like, that doesn't ever stick. He always comes back to
Yeah.
being velvet blue fur.
And has had a lot of lovers.
Oh my goodness.
While being velvety
Yes.
and blue. So many.
Right. Some of which are demons and a lot of which are not. Right? So, like in the Excalibur series, which is one of the things that Anna concentrates on, it's an offshoot of the X-Men. It was about a sort of obscure team of characters who are in Britain most of the time. And one of the like people that Nightcrawler finds himself just deeply in love with is, she's called Megan, but she is literally a demon in her natural form. She is exactly what you'd expect a demon to look like. She's kind of furry. She has very big pointy ears, big claws. She's a shapeshifter.
Mm.
She masks herself as a buxom, blonde, sort of tits and ass woman most of the time because that's what the man that she's in love with wants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So she basically tames her own demon in order
Mm.
to fit in. But Nightcrawler just absolutely adores her, and that's, I think, kind of one of the strongest examples of like demon lovers, like actual demon lovers.
Mm-hmm.
Which again brings in this like weird messiness about like, do we actually have an interest in seeing demon lovers, or do we need someone to just be conventionally like sexy in human terms?
That's interesting. And I mean, I guess it depends on how much the text is hoping that you stick yourself in the position of the human-y person.
Mm-hmm.
But really quickly, just want to shout out that podcast because that's Gosh Golly Wow,
Yeah.
right? And friend of the show, Mav, is on that as well. So shout out to Gosh Golly Wow. And while you were talking too, and you were talking about the demoness with her horns, it made me think of another property and thinking about the lovers aspect of this, right? It's a dating sim and it's called Monster Prom. And there's also Monster Camp, and two of the characters in Monster Camp are very specifically like demons from hell with horns. One is the Prince of Hell, the other one is big and blue, and she wears cut off shirts, and her name is Dahlia. And they are designed differently than the other like monsters, which in Monster Camp you have, I'm trying to remember, there's like a computer man and there's like a Grim Reaper and there are like all these other like mm, monster archetypes, let's say, but they're very two specific demons. So if we're thinking about like what we want from demon lovers versus like monstrous lovers, I do think there are some design elements that come into that.
Mm.
You know, Dahlia is the same color as Nightcrawler, right? So, and I love them both. They're two of my favorite to romance. And they don't change for you. They change costumes,
Mhm.
but like the allure of the game is very much that you're dating monsters. They don't ever have like human or fully human appearances, which I think is interesting. I think we started to touch on this a little bit, but something that we wanted to think about is what makes it fun to read stories, to watch movies that feature demon lovers. You've already heard me shrieking about Sesshomaru and Alucard, so we all know it's fun for me. But we think beyond Ayani. Like, what about demon lovers makes this a trope that people keep coming back to, that writers keep utilizing?
So there's an example that I'm thinking of from, again, the C drama, Love Between Fairy and Devil, where
Oh,
there's the scene where Dongfang Chinsong, who is the Moon Supreme, so the head of like the Moon tribe, which is the equivalent of the Demon tribe, where he like saves Fairy Orchid, who's the female lead, and it kind of like lets the world burn and like would cause the world to burn to do it, and he's put in contrast with
Changhong?
blanking on, yeah, Chonghong, that sounds right.
Yeah.
Uh, who like can't save Orchid because he has to save the world instead. So that sort of like negotiable moral compass where they don't have to do the
Mm.
objectively right thing, but will do the thing that they have decided is right for them in that moment, I think is really appealing about that kind of more chaotic figure.
Yeah, and do the right thing kind of for you at the center in a sense.
Mhm.
It's not just that like this is my devil moral compass and it leads me to do this, but more like you are more important to me than everything else, than all of those other
Oh,
creatures
yeah,
that
it's
are
like you
like
you
you.
are my person. I will save you even if it requires burning down the fairy realm. Like I'll do it.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
know what? I think
Mhm.
this is maybe another like we're sort of dancing around another criteria that for me I see Good
Ooh.
Omens doing a really good job of pulling out. Maybe another difference or what makes a demon a particular thing is exactly that. Like it is not in fact a dogmatic adherence to evil or bad.
Mhm.
It's chaos, it's undecidability, it's unpredictability, right? So, like, this is the
Mm.
whole kind of setup of Good Omens and why Crowley sort of he certainly rejects heaven because of the polemic of purity and good and just
Mhm.
whatever
Mhm.
white nonsense in every sense of the word. So it's that coupling of those words.
Literal and figurative.
But also the rejection of hell because he finds that I mean, they're equally as boring and bureaucratic because it is this sort of unthinking adherence to some kind of rote definition of evil.
Mm-hmm.
Crowley as a demon is not for either, right? And I think that's exactly like what we seem to be talking about here. And I agree. I think it's part of what makes it sexy is this like the titillation that comes from not actually knowing exactly what they're going to do, but if they're
Mhm.
like your lover, you're probably okay. Like, this the sort of like taste of being that desirable
Mm-hmm.
that some creature would literally move heaven and earth for you, even if that's quite bad. Like, that's pretty hot.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I don't have anything eloquent to add,
it's
but
like
yeah.
certainly more complicated than like I do what's right all the time. I mean, that's just, or I do
Mm-hmm.
what's bad all the time because it's bad. That's boring. It's
Yeah.
boring.
Mhm.
Corinne, you looked like you had something to
Oh, yeah,
say.
I'm thinking of Lanfear again from Wheel of Time because there's a
Mm-hmm. Of
scene
course you
again.
are.
Of course I am. Well, there's this because I hope this is not a spoiler, but she is a bad person, and she and Rand in no world end up together. But like there's like a scene in the last season where he like is held captive by some people and like she comes for him and like it is so hot that she like the way she does that and but she also like kills a lot of people and burns down a city to do it. So like it's like, oh well, this is bad. This is a Forsaken doing Forsaken things. But she's also doing it to get Rand because he asked her to. So I don't know. But she's also doing it to like involve him in her schemes. So like that's also bad. So she's kind of on this other end of on this spectrum of like demon or demon-esque characters. She
Mm-hmm.
is like far enough evil that like you shouldn't mess with that for too long. But I think she still is in that spectrum.
Yeah, it's funny because I think this is one of the places where like fantasy excels, right? Because I'm gonna make a really bold claim here, but the majority of people don't actually want to be romanced by a demon, right? That
Mhm.
kind of like unpredictability and like, oh, maybe they'll roast the village is not necessarily something that you want in a relationship.
No, yeah, like that's abuse.
Yeah, right? So I'm not gonna speak for everybody, but I feel like a large majority of people are like, yeah, don't want that in my life. But but in fantasy, right? This is a place where you can explore those kinds of desires in a safe way,
Mhm.
right? So like in my disc, I talk about this game called Obey Me, One Master to Rule Them All, in which you have the potential to romance the seven brothers of hell, right? All named after different sins. So once again, aligned with like the Christian understanding of demon. But the point is that like you're thrown in this situation that would of course be terrifying and horrible. Like you're sent to demon school as a transfer student, but you didn't apply for it. And you wake up and the king of hell is like, welcome, I'm school council president. It's a whole situation. But anyhow, you're constantly thrust into these situations in which it's like, oh no, the demon could be bad, but the demon likes you and wants to protect you. And it's like all those other demons, they might eat you. So don't wander around the school without me by your side to protect you. But also, like, I'm a scary demon and I do scary demon things. So I definitely think this is one of those places where fantasy excels by letting the lover be a horrible person and then letting the audience revel in that horror for their sake in a way that is just, you know, not acceptable in the real world. If Andrew was like, Ayani, I'm coming to get you from work and I'm gonna burn the town on the way, I'd be like, baby, no, don't do that, please. Not appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I think this echoes like one of the foundational ideas of monster theory is that like monsters are made not only out of what we're afraid of,
Mhm.
but what we desire.
Mhm.
Like those are coupled in
Mhm.
a way that cannot be unpicked. Every monster is demonstrative not only of anxieties but also desires.
Mhm.
Obviously, vampires are a very good example of this. But, you could really like take that lens to any kind of monster. And I think that's definitely a part of what's going on with demons as well. And I think you're right, Ayani, like it's like most of us like dream about wanting a panther or a tiger, like being able to pet one
For
and
sure. It's like
like
a big dream of mine.
at some point in your life you're like, I'm gonna have a tiger. But then you see these horrible people who actually try to keep tigers, and you're like, there's a reason you're fucking getting eaten piece by piece. Like, you're an idiot. This is terrible. You shouldn't have real tigers. Like, I think that's exactly, you're right. Like, we also are getting a lot out of fantasy in this way. I don't think there's anything wrong with us harboring these desires that are flirting with our fears. If, as you say, like we're able to exercise our demons in a fantastical way.
So, flirting with our fears might be the name of my book. I will credit you because that's amazing. But it's funny with the tiger example, this is going to be so silly, but it's kind of like in my brain, I'm like, oh my God, I'd love to have a tiger. I'd love to pet the tiger and snuggle the tiger. What do I have? I have a really pissed off cat who needs anti-anxiety medication. So like, no, I don't actually want all the drama that a tiger needs. Like my little cat is enough. She's so terrible. I love her so much, but she's so terrible. So it's yeah, there's a lot of lifting that fantasy is doing. But that's important work, I think. But Corinne, we've kind of been like monstering a lot over here. Did you have anything you wanted to add about like what makes demon lovers fun to watch?
I think maybe the last sort of question I will throw at the group, the room, I don't know, is like, how much does the media have to frame the demon lover character as like a legitimate love interest versus how much does like the audience or like the fan base projecting onto that character turn them into a demon lover? Like, how much does it have to be, I guess, okay, I never actually think anything has to be show approved for like people to like fan about it. That's fine. But if we're thinking about the demon lover figure, is there a distinction between one that the show frames as a legitimate romantic lover interest and one that fans decide is worthy of that kind of attraction?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I hate to like take the lazy way out, but I honestly think you'd have to look at that on a case by case basis. Like I don't know if I feel strongly one way or the other, because a lot of my examples that I've given, Good Omens being the most obvious one, or even Howl, and certainly The Good Place. I mean, that's not necessarily a demon lover, but if we're just going to toss Michael in there for grins, that's all definitely show approved, right? There's a lot of work being done to frame those demons as redeemable in the sense that we're allowed to like them. We're being like approved. But then I was just thinking, when you were talking about Shadow and Bone, which again, it's both a series of novels and then a series on Netflix, the Darkling, who's played by Ben Barnes, is fucking hot.
Oh yeah.
Just so smoking. Great British guy with like very dark hair and eyebrows, and he's so bad. And like, there's a long stretch of time where you kind of think that the female protagonist, Alina, is going to match with him. And then he really goes off the bad end rails. Like, he's just supposed to be straight up villain. But when you look at the fan art, nobody gave that up. That ship did not sink in the way that the show wants it to, right? Like, they call the couple Dark Lena, and Dark Lena exists in fan art today. Like, nobody wants to give that one up, and he's horrible. That's not endorsed, right? So like, I think there's like this really interesting contrast there. I also thought very briefly about the film The Witches of Eastwick, which is based on the John Updike novel, and it was starring Cher, Susan Sarandon, and Michelle Pfeiffer. And Jack Nicholson is the demon, and the three women are witches. And they all kind of, through a series of sort of deception and confusion, they end up falling in love with him. It's a movie that I have a strange relationship with. I hated it the first time I saw it because, like the novel and a lot of John Updike's work in general, I think it's misogynist as fuck. But then I saw it again, and like there's a lot of like big campy like 80s, early 90s stuff to it that I can't like not like. That again, he is a demon lover in a very literal sense, and you start, as the movie continues to unfold, to see like he's such a bastard. Like he is an awful character. But as he gets worse, the witches get sexier. And, like, they all come into their power kind of at the same trajectory. And so that's another example where I'm like, I don't know what to say to your question, because I don't believe you're supposed to like him, although John Updike clearly thinks that this is what women do, that women love assholes in spite of themselves, right? That all women are just sex mad, like vapid witches who can't stop themselves.
Ouch.
Fuck him. But it's
attacks.
But I think there is something going on there in this sort of visual representation of these women, like literally sort of opening up into these very powerful, very sexy characters, which happens like simultaneous to the sort of devolving of the Jack Nicholson character into just full demon. So do you kind of like him in some way because of his association with this like evolution of these women, even though you really shouldn't like him at all because he's awful?
Oh, that's interesting.
I don't know. I don't actually know the answer to that, and I don't know whether I'd be able to tell you even if I watched the film another 6 times. So like it's so hard to make that distinction. It's such a good question that you've posed.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to be like Sam said it. Sam kind of summed it up, but I think it's like it's really hard to remove the audience from any kind of equation in this, right? Because on one hand, yes, if it's the sanctioned will of the plot, then yeah, it's a demon lover's plot, right? But I think fan culture kind of has a mind of its own. And if there's a character that's a demon or something that folks latch onto, and now there's sexy fan art, you know what I mean? And self-insert fan fiction, or like reader X said demon fan fiction, then I wouldn't not call that character a demon lover. You know what I mean? You know, I'm sure there are characters that people have their own headcanons about, and now they become demon lovers in their own mind. You know, this is again not pointing to Ayani at all whatsoever. You know, so maybe, I mean, does that mean I've answered your question as no, it doesn't matter?
Yeah. It's kind of an unanswerable question. I mean, just like the question of like, what is the difference between a demon and a monster?
Yeah.
Like, I think there's a difference. Could I tell you what it is? No. I think it's that sort of similar. There is an umbrella, and some things are obviously under this umbrella, and some things are maybe edge cases. But like, they can all come in. It's fine.
I don't know why, but that feels like a great place to kind of like start to wrap up the conversation. It doesn't matter. They can all come in. It's fine. Demon lovers for everyone.
All demon lovers welcome here.
It's a broad damned church.
Oh, this was so fun. So any last thoughts on demon lovers, y'all? I think we've dropped a lot of great titles here. If people would like to investigate some hot demons on their own or some not so hot demons on their own, like you have quite a reading list. But also I want your demon stories, so make sure you tell me like about them. I want to hear what you all are reading about demon lovers. But any last thoughts about demon lovers, y'all, before we head into the wrap up?
I have to say, I think you picked an absolutely amazing topic because, of course, as we've been talking, it's been jogging my brain, and now I'm starting to realize that like a huge portion of the media I consume has demon lovers in it. So like, I think this is actually a very relevant and sort of profound conversation in terms of what we apparently really like to see in our media.
It's demons. That's what we want. But only in fantasy, not in real life.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't want this conversation to like suddenly my lights start flickering and I'm like, no, not really. Don't really want that. No, thank you. Corinne, any last feelings or thoughts or emotions?
I guess this is not really a question and we don't have to pursue it, but I am kind of thinking about the gendered nature of demons because while we have a few key female examples in there, a lot of these are male and very masculine figures. So just something to put a pin in, but also like a quick shout out to my fox demon girl Pyonran from Till the End of the Moon because she's great, and there are a lot of fox girlies in Zeonzia that are all excellent. So
Yeah, I think that is interesting. I'm pretty sure there are a bunch. I know I looked up a list of like 10 best demon lovers in anime before we got on the call, and a lot of them featured like this guy, hapless man, falls in love with hot demon. It's like, oh, okay. But I also want to use this to shout out a webcomic that I accidentally stumbled onto and then have now been reading called Monsters and Girls by Idol Amantis, who I think they go by Quill. Um, and it's all about angels and demons and how they love each other. Their relationships. There's an angel that is married to a succubus and they love each other, and that's just what it is. So there are girl demons out there as well that are loved and love interest. Well, excellent. Sam, this has been so much fun. Thank you for coming on and talking about demon lovers with us and
yeah, thank
philosophizing
you.
about what a demon is.
Absolutely. I really appreciate you extending the invitation, and again, I'm glad Cody brought it up because it's always so fun. I love geeking out about monstrous things, and of course, I'm always happy to talk about my pop culture fixes for the moment. So this is perfect.
So, Sam, where can the people find you on the great wide internet?
Gosh, it's changed a lot recently. Given the demonic behavior of a certain social media
Ooh,
mogul.
good tie-in. Don't want to
Yeah,
romance
but
that one.
no, not the lover
No.
type. So my website is just samlangsdale.com. I am also on Blue Sky, and my username is Sam Langsdale at Blue Sky, whatever the heck it is,
Mhm.
.social, I think. Typically that's sort of the username that I have. I have an account on Mastodon. I can't recommend following me there because yeah, the account is as dormant as Mastodons themselves. So
Oof.
I'm not gonna say that's gonna do you much good, but I think probably primarily Blue Sky is the way to go. Or you can always reach me via my website.
And y'all should keep your eye out for Sam's book coming out in the near future. So I guess at this point we should plug future SLL episodes. I think we kind of already did that because we've got Lost You Forever coming up. I think that's mainly what we have on the docket right now.
So that is your viewing homework if anyone likes to do their SLL homework. The C drama Lost You Forever season
Yeah,
1.
that's like what, 40 episodes?
Yeah. It might be 39.
Okay, so you got a lot of homework, so you should get started. It's a lot of fun, so tell us what you think about it on our socials. You can find us on Instagram at SexLoveLit. Technically, we are other places too at SexLoveLit, like Threads, but I think we are most active on Instagram, and that's where you can find our stories and vote on our polls and things of that nature. But also, Spotify has features where you can answer questions and polls right on the episode. And I'm going to attach questions to this one as well. So you should go and answer and let us know what you think. This has been Sex Love Literature. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.